Good morning. We're live. We got here finally. We had a little hitch, didn't we, Tone? But we're here. We're here in one piece. It's Sunday morning. So we've got a first today on Walking with My Goddess. Drum roll, please. We have a man. Yay! And this man happens to be my friend Tony. So this is Albion Tony Grey. And I've known you for about 5 years, Tony, haven't I?
Four. It'll be 4 years May since I've been
4
home.
years May, yes, it's got to be 4 years May. Yeah, it feels like longer. But that's really funny because actually our group is Tony's part of lots of pagan things around Kent, but he's part of the Maidstone group that I'm sort of, admin and I sort of, runs a strong word. It's like, herding pagans is like herding cats, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Oh, we've got two of me. It feels like longer. We don't want two of me. One's enough, isn't it? Sorry. I had to put my I put my phone on so that I can see the comments, and Fiona's saying good morning, and Gary's here saying good morning as well. Good morning, Gary and Fiona. Good job Gary's not on live because I couldn't trust a word he said. That'd be full of swear words and innuendo. Good morning, lovely Gary. We love you very much. But yeah, Gary is a really lovely bloke. He's not the sort of person you put on speakerphone in front of your mum, trust me. But anyway, I've known Tony for 4 years in May, and he's and Lonnie's here. Good morning, Lon, lovely to see you. Tony is a big part of the pagan scene in Kent. You've got a finger in every pie, really, haven't you? Well, you get between lots of moods, don't you? Like lots of us do. It's quite a small. It's a growing scene, I have to say. It's very much a growing scene. But lots of people go to lots of different things, so we tend to know each other in different towns, don't we? But anyway, so as my very first man on the show, apart from my husband occasionally poking his head in or saying, "Oh, you're live, sorry love, didn't realise," it's Tony. Say good morning to you.
Hello.
Good morning. So would you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do in terms of your pagan thing, or whatever you want to tell us about you, just a couple of things, just so people that don't know you. I mean, the people watching so far do know you, so don't fib.
Right. I'm 56 and I've been a pagan for 44 of those years.
Wow, that's a long time. Did you always know you were a pagan? Did you wake up one day and go, I'm a pagan? So I'm guessing at 12 you started thinking, did you start thinking, yeah, this is the way for me? Or was it subconscious, unconscious rather?
It was 12 when I started realising what I was. Yeah. But when I look back at it, it's probably 7 or 8 when I started getting interested in those things. So I've been officially a pagan sort of since I was 12. However, it wasn't until I was 18, 19 that I came across the phrase pagan, witch and whatever, and realised that is actually what I was. But being an active seeker, shall we say, since the age of 12, but having had a background interest in it since I was about 7 or 8.
I think that's quite common. Yeah. People as a child are interested in things but don't fully explore it till they get old or put it on the back burner. I mean, life happens. You hit puberty, girls happen, boys happen, and then there's school and there's work and there's marriage and babies, and sometimes it doesn't come till later. By the way, you've just been described as a local legend.
Have I? Oh, that's lovely.
That's pretty true, Lon. He's a local legend, all right. Yeah. Oh, and lovely Laura's watching too. So
you see, the weird thing is about my pagan antecedents, shall I say, is that my mum's, I was adopted at 7 months, but the family that adopted me were from travel background. And so I grew up with my granddad always telling me about lore of the land and animal sort of traits and stuff like that. And he was a bird man. He could go out, just put his hand out, and birds would land on his hand, and he'd sit there and talk to them.
Wow.
And
so there's stuff you've been taught as a little fella, but little Tony. We have to see a picture of little Tony one day. I keep saying we're going to do that. Oh no, that sounds really wrong.
Trust you to think of that.
That's why we don't have mates.
But the weird thing is, it was only in the last behave.
Oh my God! Right, so, you know what I'm like? Oh my goodness! So sorry.
But it's only been in the last 5 years. No, in the last 4 years that I found out my mum's family go even further back in 1643, I think it was. One of my mum's ancestors, Elizabeth Harris, my mum was called Joan Elizabeth Harris, that was her maiden name, was hanged as a witch at Faversham. So it's definitely in my adopted family. And then when I found my birth family in 2010, turns out I've got witches on my mum's side of my
Are they
birth mum's
Cornish?
side.
Do I remember them
Yeah,
being Cornish?
it is. They are, yeah. But my name was Welsh, so I got the Celtic side of it as well. But
Well,
now I
with your
found
hair colour.
yeah. Now my American family have found me. It turns out they're originally from Westphalia in the 17th, late 18th century, which is the base of Saxony. So that'll explain my interest in runes, because I've got Norse in my family as well from my birth
Wow,
mum.
yeah, you have.
Shears is my birth name, which is the Vikings from Norway that settled in Cornwall, where that come from. The Shears, the actual name originates from Oslo. And then I've got the North, which is my dad's side, which are Saxons, proper Saxons from Saxony, not the English ones who have been assimilated into Saxony. We're proper Saxons. So
yeah, definitely.
My whole history is,
So your heritage lends you to lots of different gods, because my very first experience of a god was the Christian god.
Same here, yeah.
So I grew up in a Christian household. I went to Sunday school, and I went to I did go to church from time to time. I went to Sunday school, and I was quite happy with God, though I did ask why there wasn't a Mrs. God. As you do. It stands to reason. Just for what Gary's saying, see, you don't need me to be bad. But it's because he came on, that's what it was. It's Gary's fault. We'll blame Gary.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was at infant school, and I did the reading tree, like all the kids do, and I was a really precocious reader, because I'd seen in the second highest set of books were stories about the gods and the goddesses, and they were about Zeus and Jupiter and Persephone and Demeter. They were about Loki and Freya and Thor, and so it was the Norse stories and mythology, and the Greek and the Roman, and that was my first experience of the gods. And that's all I knew. I didn't know any more about them until I started on my pagan journey. It really, this sounds really naive, but it really didn't occur to me until then, until I started hearing more, that there were Celtic, Vedic, First Nation American, South African, whatever gods. It just didn't occur to me, though it had occurred to me about goddesses, which is a really strange kind of thing. So, I mean, your path is a bit eclectic, isn't it? So do you want to tell, before we jump into the gods, because how this came about was I did a workshop a few weeks ago, and there was a gentleman who it was a mind, body, soul workshop, and there's a gentleman who'd come along, and he said, "Oh, I don't know much about the goddess," because Jenny and I did a walking with the maiden little goddess workshop. And I said, well, walk with your youth. And I thought, I don't know anything about the male, masculine, divine. And I thought, I need to address that balance, and especially since we're coming up to equinox, which is about balance. And I thought, right, I'm gonna ask Tony, because I don't know. And we'd mentioned it before, hadn't we? That I just know nothing about the gods. So I'm jumping on slightly. So let's jump back. So when did you discover that? Did you always? Is it a? I don't like to say gender thing, but did you always know there were gods? Like I always assumed there were goddesses, and I wondered why there wasn't one. It's not as simple as male and female gender, and I don't want to get into that debate, because we could be here all day, all week, all year. So when did you discover the gods, and how is that on your path? And we'll talk about the various gods and things later on, but for you personally.
I suppose it all goes back to the runes again.
The runes.
Because my main interest when I was growing up, when I mentioned I first got interested in paganism around about 7 or 8, was through the runes, because my main interest was I loved World War II, because in the 70s every Sunday afternoon you get a World War II film on, and I was very my dad was an ex-serviceman, served in the Navy during World War II, and I collected airfix models, particularly tanks, and I was always drawn to the Battle of Stalingrad.
Okay.
And the Airfix brought out a series called Battleground or sort of Battlefront or something, and there'd be the 2 different sides of the various battles. And the Stalingrad one, you could buy a set where you had the Russians, and you had the a Russian tank, a Russian aircraft, and Russian infantry, and some ruins. And then you got the German one, and the German one was a Messerschmitt 109, German infantry, and a Panzer IV tank. And the decals on the Panzer IV tank were runes.
Wow.
And so I got interested in finding out what these signs meant. And it turns out that most of the Wehrmacht, their divisional signs or regimental signs, were based around various depictions of runes. And when I saw,
Nazis had a huge thing about the occult, didn't they? Hitler had a huge thing about the occult.
Well, it was Himmler. Himmler was the main man.
Was it Himmler? Okay.
Yeah. And the weird thing is, I'm very interested in Himmler. Himmler was very interested in Crowley, again, another one of my interests. But he's a fellow Libyan. His birthday's the day before me, which was Crowley's birthday. Their birthday's the 12th of October. My birthday's 13th of October. And I don't know whether it's because it was Crowley's birthday then that these people who are born around my birthday are interested. You've got some very high profile people interested in the runes and Crowley. Well, I'm not sure if it's because their birthday's close to his, or whether it's just something within our star sign, within that particular few days of that star sign. Darryl Hall of Hall & Oates, so R&B band, you don't think much of him. His first debut album was based all around Crowley's teachings. He's a big fan of Crowley.
Wow.
When's his birthday? 12th of October. Dave Vanian of The Damned, when's his birthday? 12th of October. He's interested in Crowley.
There is that balance in Libra, isn't there?
Yeah.
And the questioning, the seeking to find the truth, to find that balance is a key. My best friend's Libra, and so I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So I admit the divisional sign for I think it was the 27th Panzer Regiment was Uthala, and that was one of the decals on this Panzer IV tank. And the minute I saw that decal, I saw that rune, I knew it. I know I was drawn to it, and it resonated with me. And I think that was my entry point into paganism.
Wow. And what's that? I'll have to do another one on the runes. I've got a rune person lined up. Don't go too far. You know who you are. Yeah, he's watching. He's probably not aware of it yet. He's sort of going, "What, me? Why? What?" So from there, where did you go from there?
I also loved the Hammer horror films, and so you've got
love a horror
of rituals and stuff in that, and I was drawn to the esoteric because I was always interested in the supernatural as well, and I think all the boundaries blurred, and so I've started going down different paths within it. The Devil Rides Out, Dennis Wheatley, one of my favourite all-time films.
Oh my God, Dennis Wheatley, because no one in my family at all is pagan. The women are all found their own spiritual path. There's a strong line of that. But my great aunt used to read. She loved Dennis Wheatley. I forgot about him. Okay, sorry. I'll let you crack on.
Dennis Wheatley, I maintain, knew Doreen Valianti, because having read her biography, she worked for the Secret Service during World War II and thereabouts.
Doreen Valianti did?
Yeah.
Wow.
And having read that, I've recently got round to actually reading some Dennis Wheatley, and I read To the Devil a Daughter, which is totally different to the film, and it's set in the 50s, and there's a Christopher Lee type character who's the head of service, this witch in it is a secretary to him, and you read it, and it's obviously the character in this book is based around her.
Yes.
And this bloke is based, and the main good guy, shall we say, is based around Christopher Lee, and Dorian Vianti and Christopher Lee knew each other.
Oh wow, that's
And
interesting.
he worked in the during World War II, he worked for the Special Forces. Again, another layer, it all gets muddy. And what about Gerald Gardner? What did he do? He worked. Hello, Arthur.
I was going to ask after the cats, but we've just seen Arthur.
and Gerald Gardner worked around the Secret Service when he organised the Cone of Power incident. Yeah, Arthur's back. He's come to look out the window.
He's a male cat. He's feeling the male energy. But
he loves tarot cards.
Does he? Isn't it funny? My male cat will not leave my altar alone. Yeah, it's funny. So you've got your we'll talk about the popular culture and paganism later, because that's something else I want to briefly touch with you, because that's a whole nother thing. So obviously that sparked your interest. So when did you learn about the gods? Because that's I'm not struggling to see, but I want to know where they came from and how they differ, how they are similar to the goddess from, so
again, I suppose it's my interest. It's my interest in World War II and the Wehrmacht, and particularly Himmler. I've always had great interest in Himmler. Yeah. I don't think Hitler was the architect of World War II. I think Himmler was the main man, and whereas Hitler started to go a bit strange, it was Himmler who suggested the concentration camps. It was him who
he was the backbone. Do you think the pushing forward?
He was the main mysticism, the main mystic,
right?
And I've always been interested in Knights Templar as well. And when you look at the Knights Templar, they were an inspiration for the SS. And when you read about the SS, they were very much into Odinism and the side of it. And the more I read about them, the more I went down the Norse path, not because of any political ideology, but because the interest of it.
It's kind of a byproduct of your interest in the war.
And I suppose the first two gods I became aware of were Odin and Thor.
Yeah.
Which is why I still walk the path for them now, because they're my oldest two companions. Although I didn't really worship them as such, but they were two people who've always been in the background. And Odin is this is again, we were talking just before we went on air about how the weird influences and stuff. As you know, I'm a writer and a poet, and I'm very interested in that. It was only in the last 5-6 years I found out that Odin, one of his roles, is the god of poets and writers.
Did you see the picture I posted midweek about Odin? And I didn't know until I'd researched that. Morning Jen, morning Kaylee, morning Andy. He was one of some of his what do you call them, correspondences are magic, runes and poetry. And I don't know if you saw me going when you said that, but I'm thinking, of course, Odin is completely, because that's if you added tarot cards on there, because Tone is a tarot card reader as well, a really good tarot card reader. If you added that to it, that would be just you, wouldn't it? That's not surprising. That's your thing.
Yeah. So you see the other thing about Odin is he's got two ravens, and again, this is where my parallel development, as I call it, comes into place. As everyone that knows me knows, I'm a big Stranglers fan.
Yeah.
When I say I started identifying as pagan when I was 12, again through assimilation, on the front cover of the Rats Novedicus, which was Stranglers' first album released in 1977, which I bought on my 13th birthday, but I was aware of it as a 12-and-a-half-year-old. Dave Greenfield's quite prominent in wearing a pentagram, and then when you see the inner sleeve, you see it very, very clearly. And it wasn't until 7 or 8 years later when Dave did an interview in Strangled, it turns out he was always interested in the path. He didn't practice, but he was a researcher, and it's sort of like, well, there must have been an underlying current within them as well, especially from Dave. And I've met Dave so many times when he was alive, and we used to chat about these things, and he's an old hippie, which basically is the path that I sort of took. And then you look at the different musical influences, different TV influences, stuff like that. All put me down the line of paganism, but also watching various programs like Warrior Queen and Arthur of the Britons, stuff like that, you start to learn about their gods. And the thing I find interesting, what was mentioned earlier about Saxony and Vikings, in Saxon, where their version of the runes and their version of the pantheon, Odin is Woden.
Yes, and that's Wednesday's supposedly named after.
Yeah.
So that was a. So excuse my ignorance. So Odin is Norse. Anybody who's watching going, how do you not know this? Because I just don't, because I'm a feminine divine person. And actually I've realised that, especially like I said about with equinox, you need that balance, and you definitely. Laura's saying, are you a Stranglers fan? You've never mentioned that. Laura Fulton, you sarky madam. Oh, and Jen. Yeah. I've never heard him say it neither. And Jen's saying, I didn't know you wrote poetry, Albion. Would love to see some if you have any posted anywhere. He writes loads of poetry. We have to share that with Jen later.
I've got a couple of books which are published via Sheppey Writers Group I belong to, which I've had poetry appearing. So yes,
Jen is a poet. So Woden is that's sort of Saxon Britain. Is this
Saxon Germany?
Saxon Germany, right? Yeah. Okay, I was going to say, because I'm thinking Saxon Britain's after the Romans been, so I'm a little bit confused there, but that makes more sense.
Yeah. No, because where my German family originated from was Westphalia, and that was in Lower Saxony. So I discovered last night, and because I was reading up on Westphalia last night, because I was talking to one of my brothers in America.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I was reading about Westphalia just as he messaged me, and it's like, wow. And as I said, so the Wewelsburg Castle, which was the home of the SS, which was based on Norse mythology and partly Arthur and the Round Table, because it had all the rune designs on the floor and stuff like that, is actually based in Westphalia.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. So that is kind of, is that North Germany?
Yeah, northwest. It's borders Holland.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Northeast. Yeah, northeast. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's roughly, if you look to Kent, not where Sheppey and that bit, but probably closer down where Maidstone is. It's sort of that sort of relationship if you in Germany. If you look.
Okay.
So it's sort of like the middle and over to the left. So yeah. So and also, as I was talking about the Wehrmacht earlier, one of the tank regiments was called Wotan.
Right.
That was its divisional call sign. Well, actually, that's what the regiment was called, the Wotan Division. And so again, it's the Odin creeping into my military interests.
Yeah, and it's all coming in kind of subconsciously and promoting him. Well, why is that named that? And you find out more, and then that takes you to that path. Like you said, politics aside and ethics aside, because that's got nothing to do with northern heathen and Norse.
No, it's just assuming that the Germans
by Nazis, but that's by the by.
Conversely enough, though, I was regressed back in the mid-90s. In fact, I know exactly when it was. It was 1996, a couple of weeks before the European Championships.
Okay.
I used to go to a circle every Monday night on my home beat when I was a police officer, and we used to look at different subjects each week. Mainly, we did weeks and weeks on the Kabbalah. Oh God! And we also did an evening session where someone come along and regressed people.
Yeah.
And I volunteered to be regressed. And up to that point, I used to have a recurring nightmare where I was in something dark, smelly, noisy, claustrophobic, and I had to get out as it got hotter. And as I got out, you'd hear a shot ring out, and then it'd be black, and I'd wake up with a headache. I got regressed, and it turns out I was a tank commander in Stalingrad.
Wow.
Which explains so much. And now, having last night found out about being Saxon and Wewelsburg Castle and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, it's going full circle.
Definitely.
And Paderborn is in Westphalia, and Paderborn was one of the biggest German tank barracks in World War II.
Gosh.
So it's a lots of real life history with me coming back with subconscious history.
So that's
and
kind
I'm
of
sure,
like a path over several lifetimes then, isn't it? We're talking about, really.
Yeah, very much so, which is why, again, I think that Odin and Thor resonated with me first off.
When you were a young lad. So
and the other reason I got into, funnily enough, the other reason I got into Odin when I was about 12 was because of this.
Oh, my dad used to read them.
This is
Harry's saying, God, it sounds like a merry-go-round.
This is Liquidate Paris, and in it, it's about a penal battalion of the tank regiment.
Yeah.
And they get sent to Paris, and they're all ex-thieves and rogues and stuff like that. Fantastic, but very, very, I've read all the series. And they go out on the black market and try to steal a pig. And when they're trying to convey this stolen pig through the back streets of Paris at night, trying to avoid all the security patrols and things, someone says, "Didn't Odin have a pig?" And then for the rest of the book, there's references to Odin's pig, and it's all like, yeah, what is its name? Well, I don't know. And that you get various people say, "Oh, I've got a question to ask you. Do you know what Odin's pig was called? That chap Odin, did he have a pig?" In fact, the page I've just opened it up at, it was 236. Where is this? Yeah. Hang on. This. Right. "Hang on," said Porter, as we unceremoniously dumped the coffin on the kitchen floor. He turned to the old man. "What was the name of that pig they had in olden times?" "Who had?" asked the old man patiently. "The gods and things, Odin and Thor and all that lot." "I haven't the faintest idea." "Odin?" supplied Barcelona. "It was Odin that had a pig. What was it called?" "That's what I want to know. What was it called?" Nobody knew. The question went the rounds and returned to Porter, who became quite heated as to whether the pig belonged to Odin or Freya or Thor. Tiny walked out into the street and began stopping passers-by, and soon a whole group of strangers were disputing the question. "Somebody must know," said Porter. "The police," I said. "Try the police." The legionnaire instantly picked up the telephone. He was very polite about it, quite apologetic, but we all heard the OSEC come down the wire towards him. I didn't intend to upset you," said the legionnaire smoothly. "Some bloody nut wants to know the name of a famous pig," we heard the man shout to a companion. And we heard the answer, faint but indistinguishable. "The only famous pig I know is called Adolf." After that, we tried the field gendarmerie. More, I've succumbed this time by the threat of arrest. We still hadn't settled the matter. An hour later, we left the bistro with the pig safely stowed away in Jeanette's care. As we reached the place Clichy, we were stopped by a patrol. Mechanically, they demanded our papers, but it was that plain that for once had no interest in them. "Want to ask you something," said the leader of the patrol, leaning confidentially towards us. "You know that chap called Odin? You know he kept a pig?" We nodded breathlessly. "Well, you don't happen to know what it's called, do you?" Regretfully, we admitted our ignorance. We arrived back half an hour later to the barracks. To our amazement, no one batted an eyelid. They were all too busy talking about pigs. "Hey, you," an officer waved an imperative hand at us. "You don't by any chance happen to know the name of the pig that used to belong to Thor, do you? We're having a little bet on it. Want someone to settle a question for us?" It seemed that nobody in Paris knew, and to this day, I haven't found out.
What was Odin's pig called then?
Samir.
Oh, okay. And
which is mentioned later on in the book, because their quartermaster Wolf is like a proper shyster, and he turns around and says, "Oh, I know its name, it's Shamir." And they all say, "No, it's not, you're just having a song because you're a big, no, we don't know anything." But it ends up with that sort of towards the end of the book, with about another 60-70 pages go, and every so often it pops up again. What's the name of Odin's pig? What was the name of Odin's pig? They even get the Americans on the radio saying, "Hey, you Krauts, we're having a little bet over it. Do you know the name of Odin's pig? Because someone's asked us and we don't know, and you're Krauts, so you should know it." You know,
so what is the relevance of Odin's pig? Apart from in the book by Sven, is it Sven Hassler?
Sven Hassel.
Hassel, that's it, yeah.
He was Danish. He was a Danish, a Dane in the German army. He at Valhalla.
Yeah.
When they had their feast, to me, it is the pig which is the backbone of the feast for the warriors.
So it's a
Odin
dead
kept
pig.
it and fattened it up to kill it. Well, it'd be like the warriors. It'd die every night at the feast and then be reborn the next day to feed them again.
Is that what happens at Valhalla?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You see,
Okay.
what Valhalla is, the Valkyries are very similar to Morrigan.
The Fates.
Yeah, no, very similar to Morrigan. They go
Okay.
around the battlefields and they pick up the souls of the fallen warriors who are worthy enough to go to Valhalla to fight the final battle, Ragnarok. And
Right.
so they battle and fight each night, have this feast and die, and then are reborn each day. And I always thought I'd go to Valhalla as a warrior, but then when I found out that Odin is the god of poets and writers, I suddenly realised what my role is. When I go there, it'd be as a scout, a storyteller. I'm there to provide the entertainment to the troops.
Yeah.
I'm not actually going to be I'm not going to be one of the fighting men leading the front, although I will be there to fight. My main job is to entertain the troops and keep them happy.
Okay. Okay.
So
is that what's the tree called? The noise, is it the Yggdrasil?
Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil, that's it. Yeah. So and has that got different levels of?
9 layers. Yeah.
9 layers, and that's the afterlife.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother topic of conversation, isn't it?
So again,
nothing's simple, is it? It's all complex, which is brilliant.
That's it. So that was probably where I first really heard Odin and heard him discussed at length. And of course, in that book that I read out, it mentions Thor and Freya as well. That is the first time I ever heard Freya in that book. So again, it's my Second World War interests have
That's
led
brought
me
you into it.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say so much brought me into it. It's facilitated.
Reminded you?
It's opened the gateway.
Yeah, it's reopened it, I think.
Yeah,
from going on what you said about past life, it's reopened it for you.
Things I recognised, it's all signposted it. That's probably a better way to say it.
Definitely. So,
and I first read that when I was 12.
Gosh. So that is all
8 or 9 times
very early on. Very early on.
So
you have. So how do you work with the gods? Because the other thing because obviously, what interests me as well, and obviously we could debate the patriarchy and the matriarchy and feminism, but obviously the divine feminine has always been there, but it's particularly become a big thing for women since the movement of the feminist movement. So what I'm getting at is most women I know that work with the feminine divine tend to just work with the feminine divine, which could actually be quite exclusive as opposed to inclusive, where lots of men who work with in whatever pagan path they follow have gods and the goddess as well. So that's something that I don't particularly understand, but I've obviously got to, it's obviously come up for me for a reason to learn about it and about the divine masculine rather than just God, because obviously there's the maiden, Mother Crone, the triple goddess throughout history. How do the gods have a similar sort of thing? I'm burning to know. Do you have you don't have do you have like a hunter, a father figure and a wise old man kind of figure, or am I looking at it completely the wrong way and you've just got, not you, it's a sweeping question. Gary says he works with both.
Right. I work with both.
Yeah, I know you do.
Again,
yeah.
The reason I work with both is because I'm Libyan. Balance. You've got to have masculine and feminine, the yin and yang.
Yeah.
My main, you see, when I have this conversation with Christians particularly, and they say, well, how can you worship different, a male and a female? I say, well, I can prove they exist because I see them in action every day. And they say, well, how can you see them in action every day? Father Time and Mother Nature.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and and there's
And
it's in most cultures the god is the sun, and
yeah,
the goddess is the moon in most cultures. So that is a yin and a yang. It's night and
very much
day.
so.
It's not negative and positive, not necessarily light and dark, but it is that balance, isn't it? It is that connection,
Oh,
that
yeah,
balance, and
very
they
much so.
they dovetail each other. And obviously you've got, like you say, Mother Nature, and what did you say, Father Time?
Yeah,
Father Time,
and you
because
see,
in the First Nations it's Father Sky, isn't it, and
yeah,
Mother Earth, which is another, they dovetail each other. So time, that's interesting. Old Father Time's an interesting con. So which of the gods deal with, Mother Earth and Father Sky? Good morning, Julie. My friend Julie's saying. So how do you, what sort of type do you have? Archetypes of gods, I suppose, is what I'm saying, as we do with archetypes of goddesses, or have you just got, or have you not? How does it work?
again, it depends which path you follow within paganism.
Okay, right. So with
Which
yours, let's talk about
is
your
a
path and
genuine
what you believe.
Well, Odin's my main man. It always has been, and I'll tell you another quick funny story about Odin. Odin has only got one eye because he gave his
Yes.
eye when he was hung upside down for 14 nights on the Yggdrasil and he gave his eye for the knowledge of poetry. People
Yes.
just think he gave his eye for knowledge, but it's actually knowledge of poetry. When I was about 14, 15, and I've always been drawn to cats, and in particular ginger cats. When I was 14, 15, my dad hated cats and we weren't allowed one. And my mum tolerated them, but cats were always drawn to me. And we had a stray cat, which was about for probably 7, 8 months in the neighbourhood, used to come in the garden to me, and he had one eye. And he's called
Of
Old One
course
Eye.
he did.
And he had cricket toe, and he was a really old cat. And it's only in the last couple of years I suddenly realised that was Odin coming to me.
Definitely. Definitely.
Because he suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
Because he came back a couple of years ago as well. When I had my 3 boys, one day I was sitting indoors and this cat was scratching at the door thinking it was Arthur. Opened the door and this ginger cat I'd never seen before, really old boy, proper old battered thing, looked like he'd been done all around, very, very old, just wandered straight into the house and made himself at home. And the other 3 would sit there and think, what the what's happening? And
I remember you saying.
he would come and visit me on a regular basis. And he would come in, he'd walk to their food bowl, have something to eat, and then either settle down or whatever. And Arthur was sort of like, yeah, I don't mind, because Arthur is probably the most pagan out of my 3 cats. He's most spiritual.
That's the one whose side we saw just now, yeah?
Yeah. He's called Arthur after King Arthur. And when I was looking for a cat to call Arthur, because my black one was Merlin, and the minute I saw Arthur, I saw his old face, and it was like, yeah, you're a wise old boy. You've been about before. And he's just so sort of, yeah, he's so laid back. Merlin used to run and hide, and Kai would walk up to him, escort this cat to the food bowl, let him have some, and when he had enough, he would let him know he's had enough. So he was like the guard, shall we say, the sentinel there. And this
really...
cat was only with us for 7 or 8 weeks, and then he suddenly vanished.
And my limited knowledge of Vikings and Odin, now I know this is only a series, but am I right in thinking that Odin quite often appears as a raggedy-baggedy old man and no one quite knows who he is? And it's only afterwards they realise, and I've read that it's not just Vikings on the telly, though I have seen pretty much all of those because the trucker is a Viking trucker. But there's something else where he turns up and people don't know who he is, and he comes for food and drink, he comes for shelter, doesn't he? And then he goes, and you've learned a lesson while he's there. Is that, have I dragged that out of some recess in my brain?
He's he's the wanderer. And I'm sure both these cats were different incarnations of Odin who've come to visit me over the years.
That's amazing, because it sounds, to somebody who's not on our path, it sounds super crazy. It's like, it's a cat, mate. But actually, when you are living your thing and you think of something, or you're inspired by something, and then this happens and that happens and the next thing happens, and it's reiterated and it's reinforced, and it's kind of not vindication, but a validation that your thought is right, your thought is inspired by the divine.
Yeah, and it's only after this cat disappeared, you start getting friendly, you'd sit down and go to sleep, and then just about a week or so before he disappeared, he started coming in, he'd jump up on the settee and sit on my lap and have a sleep for a half hour, then go off and disappear. So he was almost like a comfort, like a...
Wow.
And it was only after he disappeared that I thought about it. And about 6-7 months later, it suddenly occurred to me, he's Odin. And as I thought that, I suddenly remembered old One Eye, Crooked Tail.
From
And
the,
it's
from
like,
your youth.
wow. Yeah. And I put the two together. And he looks like him, but not as big.
Isn't it strange?
But yeah, both eyes. But his face was all battered. He looked like he'd been in a boxing ring.
Oh, bless his heart.
Proper old fighter. And
Oh.
I thought he was a stray cat, but when he came in the last time, he had one of his paws shaved, so he'd obviously been
looked after somewhere along the line.
Yeah. So I think he'd come in to say goodbye.
Possibly. Lonnie's saying it's a long story. For most of us, a very long story, which is going back to the gods. And Gary's saying it goes for him. It goes boy, father, and sage. And I think of maiden, mother, and crone. So that's how Gary is, and that's and Jenny said it's not always sun masculine and moon feminine, but there is usually that counterbalance. So if sun is feminine, her counterpart is male masculine. I was recently reading a thesis on solar goddesses, which you would enjoy, which I will enjoy definitely. And Julie's saying they cross your path when you need them most. Was that true? Yeah. Did that cat came in when you needed it? I know.
Oh, yeah. And I've always been drawn to cats rather than dogs. I've struggled with dogs with their energy, dogs and horses. And I know I've said this before.
Yeah.
Dogs and horses, I struggle with their energy. And I'm convinced in another one of my previous lives, I was hunted down by men on horseback with a pack of dogs.
Possibly. Very possibly. You never know, do you?
No.
Well, unless you do regression. So with the gods, I didn't know about the Celtic gods, about the sort of the traditional Britannic gods at all. They were a complete surprise to me, and so were the ones I knew about, like you say, the Norse ones, and the Roman and the Greek gods not appeal to you at all?
Funny you should say that. The Greek ones don't appeal to me whatsoever. I've got no interest in Greece or Greek mythology, although I've read it. I've read it. Yeah. But there's a Roman god whom I've got very, very interested in over the last 6 or 7 years, Vulcan.
Oh yes, you were saying that beforehand. Tell us a bit about Vulcan.
Yeah. Right. Volcanoes are named after Vulcan, and he's a fire. Okay. He's god of fire, and he's also the god of forges and metal workers.
Ooh.
And I got interested in him via a Radio 3 documentary I heard whilst I was in prison, and it was about the river that runs through Sheffield, and it was basically talking about the ironworks in Sheffield and Vulcan, how he was prevalent there, and also the River Dam, which runs from middle of Romania all the way up into Sheffield if you follow the trajectory across the sea. Right. And that's where the Danube comes from.
Yeah.
The River Danube.
Yeah.
That's part of that. And also and so this was a very, very interesting documentary. And again, being interested in Norse mythology and the forge works and ironworks and stuff like that, I was like, yeah, interesting. So I read up more and more on Vulcan, and his parents were Jupiter and Juno.
Okay.
He's the ugliest of the Roman gods.
Oh.
And because he was so ugly, Jupiter basically got rid of him. He arranged for him to meet with an accident, and because he was born with a club foot as well. And they arranged for an accident to happen, and he got pushed out the heavens and landed in the sea, where he was met by the sirens, who took him under the sea and looked after him, and found he had this talent for making things. And
Right.
he used to make all the seashells for them, and used to make grottos out of seashells. And of course, I'm a sea witch,
Yes.
so
Living
that
on an
sort of started to
island.
resonate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that resonated with me as well. And Jupiter's siblings are Mars, Minerva, Hercules, Belladonna,
Mars or
Diana.
Vulcans.
Yeah, and they used to have a 3-day festival in Rome, which started on the 23rd of August, called Vulcanalia, which was very bacchanalian as well. And they would sort of drink and do sacrifices and light fires in honour of Vulcan.
Okay, because that
And,
isn't vulcanization a process in forging, or
yeah,
what is it? It's making something. I know it's a my brother works in a foundry, and if he was watching, he'd be shouting at this, going, clear it, such and such.
isn't that when they put the hot metal into water to cool it down?
I don't know, but I know vulcanization is a part of either metal work or, Lon, if you're still watching, do you know? I don't know if he is. I'll have to look that up, but it's either forge work or tempering the steel. I'm sure
Yeah.
you're looking it up.
Yeah. No, I think it's where they put the metal into the water to
Into
cool
the
it down.
water. I think you could be
Yeah.
right, because that
that would fit in with Vulcan being expelled from heaven and going into the sea.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? It would definitely work with that. And like the grottos, I mean, that's another amazing thing. I mean, going completely off piece, but Margate Shell Grotto, if anybody hasn't gone, they have to go. You've been, haven't you?
I've been twice.
Oh, I love it. It's an amazing place. And that's a very, nobody quite knows what that is, but that's got gods and goddesses in there, and god and goddess shapes, isn't it?
I was very lucky because I'm part of the Brotherhood of the Brotherhood of the Hidden Path, which is 7 of us from the Rochester moot, the Somatic B moot, who decided to form a men's group as opposed to the women's group they had, and we privately hired it for an hour a couple of years ago. And
that's a good idea. Do you mind? I know your brotherhood is oh, Julie, it's lovely. I know. I'm not expecting you to tell me all about your brotherhood thing, because obviously there's elements of it that are secret, private. It's 7 fellows that get together. But I'm really interested to hear about a man's group, because obviously we have our moon circle, which is witchy, goddessy, Wiccan, all sorts of weird and wonderful women. And it's really good to hear about a man's group, because I think that is, as much as I think men and women do belong together, and you need that balance, I think there are some mysteries that are, and I'm not making that, I think they should be inclusive of everybody, but I think there is a place for those while people are definitely finding their path. So just tell us, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your chaps group? Oh, Lonnie's saying maybe a gathering there someday. Lonnie, is vulcanizing when they put the hot steel in the water? We should organise a trip there, definitely. Gary's up for a trip there. I know we've been there.
Yeah, no, this group, there's 7 of us, and we meet the second Sunday of each month.
Yeah, is that a magical number for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Jen's saying time to explore our own mysteries is important as coming together, and I think that's right. I think we can do that together.
You see, where we mainly operate is sort of in the area of the Bluebell Hill.
Yes.
So the various sites around there is where we go and do our rituals. Yeah. Predominantly the White Horse Stone.
Yeah.
Again, a white horse. What's Odin's main transport? Sleipnir, an 8-legged white horse.
Yes, it is. Do you know, I've been to that stone, and that is known as Odin Stone as well. Sometimes it's the Kingmaker Stone, and I can feel the energy there. Oh, Julie's saying in a mixed moot, we do rituals together, and we're all from different parts. We do that as well, Julie. Like me and Tony and some of the other people that are here, we do stuff together, but we do have men's and women's kind of groups as well. And we have all sorts of groups, don't we? We all then go and create our own little clusters and do our own thing, which I think, again, is like-minded, like-pathed is a good thing. So anyway, your chaps, sorry.
Yeah, I've had a couple of weird experiences at the White Horse Stone.
Very strange place.
When I've been there by myself, I've sat there at night just as it's got dark and sat and just meditated, and I've seen a bear, and I've also seen a man on a horse. I've seen a man on a horse there watching us, and a hooded man. I haven't felt threatened by them. They've just been there to sort of come and visit me. And slightly allied to that is the little Kit's Coty.
Yeah, the one at the bottom, the stones.
Yeah, probably about, it was New Year's Eve 2019, so it was 2018 going into 2019. I was there, and I basically apologised to the stones for the condition they'd been left in and the way people treat them. And as I did that, it's just on stroke midnight, I felt a presence on my right shoulder. And as I turned, there was the hermit from Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven illustration stood there in front of me.
Right.
And I looked at him, he looked at me, and then he vanished. Now, rationalising it, what I think is that was one of the guardians of the stone appearing to me to say thank you for honouring us and for the respect you're giving us. And the reason he appeared in that form was because that is a form that I would recognise him in. That wasn't his actual form. That
was my thoughts, absolutely. Oh, and Lon's saying a big Kent pagan gathering when things are safe. Definitely, Lonnie. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think.
So going back to this men's group.
Yeah.
Basically, we hold a ritual each time we meet if we can get out. And the ritual is based around Norse figures and also Kent figures. And it's basically, we're here as protectors of the Kent countryside. So
okay,
we honour the countryside, and we mention various peoples who have lived within Kent, like the Jutes and people like that. And
I like that. That's a really beautiful idea.
And the main two deities, the two main gods that we use in the ritual, or we speak of in the ritual, are Odin, and Chu.
And who?
And Chu.
Is that where Tuesday comes from?
Yeah, which is spelled Tyr.
Yes. Oh, it's pronounced Chu, is it? I've seen it written. And is that a rune as well?
Yeah.
That,
again, Tuesday. Yeah, it's the rune which is like in the arrow.
Yes. Oh, Julie's saying, I'm from Hampshire. I was born in Chatham. My dad has talked to the ghosts of Bluebell Hill. I've never heard of this stone. I would like to visit this. I tell you what, Julie, if you ever come back this way, you give us a shout. There's the Midway Megaliths, which is where Tone's talking about. You've got Kit's Coty up on the hill, which I absolutely adore. And you've got the lower stones, and you've got the White Horse Stone, which is the one that we're referring to, Odin Stone. There's also the Tottington Stone, the Coffin Stone. There's loads there. If you ever come this way, give me a shout, and I will take you on a tour, my darling.
I've been
it's worth a look, isn't it?
Stone. The men's group managed to locate the Coffin Stone as well, and we've been to visit.
It's in a field, isn't it?
Yeah, in a wine vineyard.
Oh, yeah, I know where it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
But going back to Vulcan, this is the other weird thing. Talk about Medway, and I lived in the Chatham Historic Dockyard for 8 years. Towards the end of last year, I got this CD, which is a 3-box set. It's called Summer is the Coming In, The Pagan Sound of British and Irish Folk, 1966 to 1975.
Yeah.
And the 4th track on it is by a band called Vulcan's Hammer, which I didn't know at the time of buying.
No.
And you get a really good comprehensive book with it, where it goes through each band and their histories and stuff. And the Vulcan's Hammer song's called The Keys of Canterbury. And this is the write-up of the band, Vulcan's Hammer. Bearing in mind what I've just said about where I lived for 8 years. Formed in the Midway area of Kent by local folk club singers Phil Birkin and Graham Thomas, Vulcan's Hammer were named after Birkin, who worked at Chatham Dockyards, discovered that the apprentice blacksmiths at the docks had a traditionally celebrated St Clement's Day with a chant concerning Vulcan, the god of the forge.
Wow.
The duo were joined in 1970 by singer Kay, who later married Phil, etc., etc. And then it goes on to say a little bit more about them. Keys of Canterbury was called in 1973. So again,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you know what? My
Only
great
after I left
granddad worked at the dockyard.
Yeah, it's only after I left the dockyard I found out about Vulcan and he resonated with me. And I don't know what. Again, osmosis.
That's and also it's what resonates with you is right for you, isn't it? And you learn to walk away from, you could sit there and study the Greek gods, and if it doesn't, you can look at them and read about them, and if it doesn't, it improves your understanding. But if it doesn't resonate with you, then there's no point trying to take on something like, for example, Jenny's watch. She's a Hellenic reconstructionist. She loves the Greek goddesses. That's perfect for Jenny. For you, it's something that isn't going to work. It's not your thing. And you do find things that inspire you and connect with you and resonate with you, and that's what you create your path from. And that is what I love about the pagan path, is that mine is mainly the feminine divine, but I know I've picked up an awful lot of druidy bits from druid friends, like from Gij, for example, who, what Gij doesn't know probably isn't worth knowing, to be honest, but she just drops little things into conversation. You go, yeah, that makes sense, because it's earth-based. I think the whole thing is that our religions, our faiths, our beliefs are earth-based. I don't know what you think about that. And you interesting you said about being the custodians and the guardians of the stone. I feel very passionately about those stones up there, and we know that there might be graffiti on there that is a couple of centuries old that might be related to my family in some way, shape or form. They're not live.
Funny about guardians, because I was just going to say, I think the reason why I'm drawn to Vulcan as well is because I've always been interested in the Romans. Never been.
Okay. Is that the battle side of it with you?
Sorry?
Is it the battle side of it with you?
It's probably the structure, the military structure. And I've always had a great interest in politics and local politics. And I wonder if I was involved in Roman politics.
Maybe.
Because I'm interested in the Roman gods and their structure, and people like Pliny and Marcus Aurelius and their philosophers, more than their actual military.
They were both, weren't they? They were military. They were also almost military commentators, weren't they?
Yeah. Forerunners of Knights Templar type things. That's what they were. And I've always been drawn to the Templars. Wow. And I look at the various. There's 4 or 5 periods of military history I'm most interested. I've touched on Roman, but I'm very interested in the Napoleonic Wars, but not the French side of it, the Peninsular Wars, the precursor when you had Trafalgar and the Battle of the Nile, when they were fighting in Portugal and Spain.
Okay, and is there a gaudy? Oh, hang on. Is there a? Gary's saying we're going to need a but. Oh, Julie's on her way now for the walk. When we're safe, Julie, you and Sean come down for the day, and we'll meet you, and we'll go. I'll take you around these. Gary says, I think we're going to need a bus to get us all there. That suits us.
Yeah.
But I was going to say we're starting to run out of time now, and I think if it's all right with you, you're going to have to come back and talk to us some more.
Yeah, definitely. I was worried I wouldn't have enough to talk about.
No, that never happens. That never happens, because it's what fascinates me is there's no. And I love doing these lives because I never know. We've got no script, as you can probably tell. And what comes out of my mouth is what comes out of my mouth, as you've obviously all realised. But I love hearing about people's own interpretation and inspiration and connections, because I could research about all the gods and read them off and what they stand for. That means nothing if you can't connect them to your life.
Precisely.
Exactly. And like, again, the Knights Templar, I hadn't thought about that. So I think we're going to we'll just go to these comments, and then I think we'll have to have Tony back again.
Just before I finish, talking about Knights Templar, this is the other weird thing, and I don't know whether I'm interested in Knights Templar because of this, or I was Knights Templar, but my birthday is 13th of October.
Yeah.
And Friday the 13th is supposed to be unlucky because on Friday the 13th of October, 13, King Louis the 14th, I think, or 12th, he signed the warrants to disband and arrest the Knights Templar.
Okay, that's interesting. Isn't it? Numbers is another thing that fascinates and interests me. I'll just look at these. A Knights Templar is another thing that we'll have to look at. Oh, and more than one thing might resonate. Mine is a mashup. This is Jen, mashup of hedge/sea witchery, Hellenic recon, and Avalonian tradition. Julie says, I agree with you. I follow the goddess, but I'm open to other ideas. I love Avebury and Stonehenge as they are near me, but we take what feeds our souls. What feeds our souls. What a lovely phrase, Julie, isn't it?
Yeah.
What feeds our souls. Lonnie's saying we all have a crossroads spiritually. I'm hoping that Julie's saying I'm hoping to visit my sister-in-law in Bexhill. We'll come visit you. Yes, please do, Julie. I'd love that. And Jen says Romans absorb so much, that's why they have equivalents to the Greek gods. So Vulcan, his counterpart is Hephaestus. Yeah.
Yes.
It's people's personal gnosis that fascinates me. Yes, I think I pronounced that right. Yeah, the you know, and how you relate it to things, and how that, and like, you know, from your childhood interest in all these things reintroduced you possibly to all these references to the Norse gods, which became your path almost subconsciously. And it's, you know, you could have read about Greek gods or Roman gods, or I don't know, stories set in India with all the Vedic and the Hindu gods, and it wouldn't have resonated.
No, but I'd also talk about the masculine, feminine. I think the Norse, or my Norse interest, is my masculine, my masculine path. But I'm also very interested in Wicca and a lot of the Wiccan gods and that part of it. Although I've moved more to traditional witchcraft, so I think that's the feminine divine which I'm interested in. So again, the balance.
Yes, definitely. Well done on the spot on pronunciation. Thanks, Jen. I think, do you know what? I wonder if my growing interest in druidry, and not to become a druid, but that kind of is the masculine parts of my psyche, the masculine side that I need to maybe develop, maybe to I don't know what it is, but that may be the balance for my feminine divine.
Yeah.
And obviously doing this, obviously asking you to come on and recognizing that there's a gap is also a balance. Yeah.
Well, the Kent Gorsted who meet at the Coldham Stones, I went to one of their rituals in 2017 and got inducted as a bard by them. And
well, that's obviously you're a poet.
That's when my writing and my poetry really took off.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how it all connects.
For me, it's the capstone. You got the balance of Norse and Wicca and on the two scales, but then the capstone across the top, it keeps it all in balance, is druidry. Like
Kit's Cotty for you.
Yeah.
Kit's Cotty House. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tony. Oh, hang on, we've got witches and the Fae are fascinating, but I'm a cocktail of beliefs. Definitely. Oops, not my desk. Definitely, Julie. Well, Tony and I are going to leave it there, but Tony, will you come back and talk to us again about your connections and other things?
Yeah, definitely. Always up for that.
And also, I've already asked Tony if he'll come back at our Maidstone Moot a few weeks ago. He started on it earlier on. He did a fascinating talk on paganism in popular culture, and we were sat there going, oh yeah, all the things that you as a child you watch, that you listen to, and you think, oh my gosh, yeah, that is connected to that. So Tony's going to come and talk to us about paganism in popular culture. We'll set a date when we finished on here, but thanks for joining us. Thank you so much, Tony. And we'll see you. Thanks everybody for joining in, all your lovely comments. Oh, my nod to the god is Dionysus, literal god of wine and bosoms. Hey, that could be me. I love a bit of wine and bosom. That's made Tony cough. That's the time we nearly tried to kill Shirley, but that's another story. So anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care. Bye.